This sweater has had so many accidents. I knitted it last autumn. I started end of August when I went to Norway, and I finished it probably end of October, end of September, beginning of October, while we're in Scotland. And I knitted on it in Norway, in Cornwall, in Yorkshire, on the way to Yorkshire, on the way to Scotland, and in Scotland. I finished it in Scotland. And I love it, and I've worn it a lot. But I've had a few accidents with this sweater. It's had a few repairs. First one was that I'd cast up too tight, or I think I'd knitted too many rounds on the neckline. It was too tight. And I remember I was filming it, so it is somewhere on YouTube, and I was sitting there saying, neckline's a little bit tight, but I can get it over my head. And then I took it off and I ripped it. So I had to redo the neckline. I'd already, I think, redone it like once when I was knitting it because it got too tight. So I undid a couple of rounds and that was still too tight. And then, because it has quite wide sleeves, I caught one of the sleeves at the top of our stairs. We have this like square bit at the top. I caught it on there and ripped it, and I noticed it has actually ripped slightly again here. I'm thinking about just ignoring that, but we'll see. Because I'm not sure if I got any more yarn left. And then a few weeks ago, I noticed that one of the sleeves, that sleeve, on the back of the sleeve here, there was like a big white patch where a lot of this pink fluff, which is the alpaca, had worn away. So I cut the sleeve off and re-knitted it. It was quite a big patch, so I just cut the sleeve off and re-knitted it. I didn't re-knit the whole sleeve, but I probably re-knitted 80–90% of it. It might have been quicker just to have taken the whole sleeve off and re-knitted it. Luckily I had a spare ball of yarn, so I was okay to re-knit it. Anyway, in this video I'm going to show you how I cut off the sleeve, pick up the stitches in order to re-knit it. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns, I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. So in this video I'm going to show you how I try and fix this sleeve. I would normally cut one stitch and then unravel around while I'm putting my live stitches back on the needle, and I'll show you how to do that as well. A few months ago I was at the knitting hotel and my lovely friend Belinda just took the scissors and chopped the whole thing off, and I thought that would be so much quicker, so I did that. I mean, it was fine. I re-knitted the sleeve, but there were a few problems which I'm also going to show you. So first I'm going to show you where I just cut the whole sleeve off with the scissors, big fabric scissors right across, and then I'm going to show you a bit I filmed earlier today with what happened with that and how I normally do it. So there are two parts of this tutorial, so I hope you enjoy it. Leave me a comment to let me know what you think and if you've ever done anything like this. Let's take a look at this sleeve to see what's happened. I don't know what's caused this. If you can see here, let me just zoom in a bit. You can see it. Can you see how it's gone all white? So it goes from here to here. It's quite a wide area. How many centimeters is that? That is, I don't know, say about there. It's about 7 centimeters, I think. And I don't know what's caused it. It's gone very kind of thin. It's almost as if it's stripped away the fluffy alpaca. I'm assuming because this is alpaca silk with a tiny bit of merino, I'm assuming that what's happened is that somehow it's stripped away the alpaca merino bit, which is the pink bit, and then because if you look at the rest of the sweater, it's got this kind of, there's a little bit of kind of white shining through the pink, which I assume is the silk, because when you dye, silk takes dye differently than animal fibers. I know silk is, a lot of people think of it as an animal fiber because it's spun by silkworms, I guess, but it's not actually an animal fiber. I mean, fibers that are harvested off an animal, like alpaca, wool, things like that. So I'm assuming it's just sort of somehow stripped away the alpaca. And I don't quite know why. I've checked the other sleeve to see, because I was wondering maybe it's where I'm resting my arm on my armrest on my chair or something like that. But I can't see anything on the other sleeve, and it looks like that. So maybe I've got something on it. I've got some kind of cleaning product, chemical product on it. I don't know. I don't wear this sweater when I do cleaning, so, and it's only on that side. It would be on the back of my elbow, so maybe I've leant against something. I don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off. So what I would normally do when I want to cut off a section of fabric, for whatever reason, is I would normally use some small scissors. I would make a cut in one stitch and then I would unravel a round or row. I actually, my lovely friend Belinda, who runs the knitting hotel, she actually, a few months ago, last year sometime I think, I was there when she was changing something on one of her designs, and she literally just took a pair of scissors and cut straight across the fabric. And I was slightly horrified because I was like, why would you do that? But it's a lot quicker. And I can still pick up the stitches that I need and put them on the needle ready to knit again. So that's what I've decided to do. I've decided to live dangerously like Belinda. So let's just see if I can organize this sweater. I've got to make sure I don't cut anything other than this sleeve. I have one 25-gram ball of this yarn left. Each 25-gram ball is about 250 meters, I think. I may have one ball and a bit left. I know on the second version of this sweater, which has a narrower sleeves, I used one complete ball, I think, for the sleeve. So this one, because the sleeve is wider, it will use more. So yeah, I'll have to check. I may have a partial ball upstairs as well, but I know I've got at least one. Okay, so I think, because there are other sections where, you know, the white is showing through a bit in the pink, it's difficult to determine where to cut actually. So this is the worst affected area. I think I'm going to go back to there. So I'm going to cut this. This is very scary. Okay, so I've got to try and make sure I cut straight across. I may not cut on the exact same row on the front and the back, and that's fine. I can fine tune that when I cut it off. Now, I don't know if I'm going to, I did think about keeping this bottom section and then grafting it, but I would have to, definitely down to by here, I would need to cut off. So it's just this section here that I might not have to reknit and just graft it on instead. And I'm just not sure, grafting this kind of yarn, I'm just wondering whether it's worth it and whether it's, I mean, it obviously would be quicker than knitting it, but it's not that much. It's not that many rows, so I could easily do that section in an evening, probably less, because it's stocking stitch. So and you're decreasing, so that's not too much to worry about. So let's put that sleeve aside, and then the other thing I could have done would be to just unravel the whole sleeve, but as I'm a little bit worried about whether I have enough yarn left, I'm not going to do that. So now what I need to do is to catch these stitches. Now I am going to have lots of little bits of fluff. Where's the underarm? Where? Okay, that's the shoulder. So this is the underarm. Okay, so I cut after I started the decreases. So these sleeves are knitted from the top down, and I can see that there's a decrease there, and there's a decrease, I think there, which is probably where I need to start picking up. So that is, there's one stitch between the decreases, so I can tell the beginning of the round is here. So I'm going to go one, two rows, one and a half, I don't know, go a bit below where I cut, because I may not have cut the same row all the way around. Now the problem with alpaca is that it does go a little bit kind of matted when you, or I wouldn't say felt, but just kind of falls slightly when you wear it, I think. So let's just see how we're going to do it. Okay, there we go. So what I need to do is basically unpick around. Okay, so we're going to go there, and I may end up with some like little bits. There we go. Okay, so that was a decrease that I've just unpicked. So if it's too scary to cut the whole thing like I did, just cut it bit by bit, that's fine. I'm pulling off some of these little bits of fibre from obviously where I cut. The advantage is if you just cut one stitch and then unpick the whole row or round, in this case, is that you do end up having, I think, a little bit more control over what you're doing, and you can probably salvage a bit more yarn, which is probably not a bad idea. Okay, so basically what I'm doing now is I'm going around and I'm trying to make sure I catch each stitch, and I have, I don't know if you can see that, let's zoom in a bit. You see I got these little like bits there, that's obviously from where I cut. So what I have to be careful about is that I catch every single stitch. It's useful to have some of those padlock, or what they call bulb stitch markers, that you can, so if you work along here and then you look back and you realize you've missed the stitch over here, you can just slip it on one of those. I don't actually have them right here with me because I didn't pick up my notions tin. Okay, I'm going to go, because this is going to take me a while, I think. I'm going to go and sit down and watch telly and do this, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. And once you've got the stitches back on the needle, what you need to do is try and work out what row you're on. Now I can do that by counting the number of stitches. I know that because I've just knitted this same sweater in a different color, I need to decrease on every fourth round, I think it is. So I'm just going to count the number of stitches I have, make sure I have an even number, because I know that's what I did before, and then start decreasing. And also I need to make sure that I have actually unpicked all the stitches that end up on my needle on the same row, because I've got a bit of yarn here, very loose thing there. So I may have to, after I've picked up all the stitches, I may have to unpick one round completely before I start knitting again, just to make sure that all my stitches are part of the same round, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'll come back once I've caught all these stitches, and I'll show you what it looks like. It is now a few weeks after I cut this sleeve. I said I would unpick the round, then I come back and show you. But to be quite honest, it took me a long time to unpick the round. When I started putting so what I did was I just took my scissors and cut right across here. I didn't try and make sure that I had the row lined up on the front and back. This is quite thin yarn, so I think that would have been difficult. But the problem was, because I cut just right across, I didn't cut on the same round all the way around. So when I started putting the stitches back on my needle, I found that I'd cut on different rounds basically. So it took me quite a while to unpick all the rounds, so that I got down to like the first round I'd cut. So I ended up unpicking the sections of the sleeve, probably up to like 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 rounds. I probably could have done that more carefully if I thought about it and make sure I lined it up more properly. But once I started unpicking it, it was a bit of a pain. And I don't think I will use that method again unless I can be sure that I'm cutting on the same round. So for example, if I had color work, different colors, like stripes or sections of patterns, then it would be easier to make sure I'm cutting on the same round all the way around. In stocking stitch, in a fabric like this with very thin yarn, so this is lace weight yarn, it's a bit more difficult to make sure that where you start cutting here is actually on the same round all the way around. And I thought there might be like a couple of rounds difference, but there was a lot of difference. I got almost all the way around, and then suddenly I found that I was down where I'd actually cut was like several rows below where I was picking up. So then I had to go all the way back again and unravel those rounds. So getting the stitches back on my needle took me a long time. So although the cutting bit was a lot quicker, getting the stitches in an order where I could knit them again was not quicker. Knitting the rest of the sleeve was probably almost as quick. No, not quite. It took me longer to knit the sleeve, but it took me a long time to put the stitches back on. So I will not be using that technique again unless I can be more sure I'm cutting the same round all the way around. But this is where I picked up and knitted. You can see the color is slightly different. So that's obviously what's happened, I think, with the problem I had, is that this pink fluffiness of the alpaca has gradually worn away because I've worn it a lot. And I've worn it a lot sitting in my chair knitting, and probably that's the part of my arm that's rubbing on my chair, because my chair has quite a high armrest. That's probably what's rubbing on the chair as I'm knitting. So wasn't 100% happy about that. You can tell the difference. I asked one of my daughters the first time I wore it after I fixed it, and they said yes, you can tell the difference, but only if you look. So I've worn it a few times, and I don't think it's a big problem, but that was something I wasn't really aware of when I knitted this and didn't think about. Having said that, even though I only knitted this about 6 months ago, I guess, I have worn it a lot. So I would definitely use this yarn again, but I would be more aware of the fact that maybe not wear it when I'm just sitting in the house knitting. So having said that, I wouldn't use that method again. I thought it'd be useful if I show you what method I would use. So I'm not actually going to unpick the whole round. I kept the rest of the sleeve that I cut off. So let's compare the two sleeves side by side, because I kept the old sleeve. This is the bit that I've worn out. And if I turn this over, you can see that's the old bit, and this is the new re-knitted bit. So you can see the new re-knitted bit is a bit darker. Let's have a look at this sleeve. See here how this part side of the sleeve, I was several rows below where I was on that side of the sleeve. That could have probably been done better by me making sure I lined up the cuffs more easily and things like that. But it's the first time I've done this where I just chopped the whole sleeve off like that. And I may try it again in the future, but only if I can be more certain that I can manage to stay on the same round, because it did take me a lot longer. You can see this, how, you know, on this side I had that many more rounds to unpick, so I didn't do a very good job. But I thought I would use this sleeve to show you how I would normally do it. So for this, you need the needles you knitted with or a size smaller. It can be useful to use a size smaller just because it's easier to get the stitches back on the needle. And I like to use a sewing needle. You can use a spare needle, a spare needle tip if you have interchangeable needles, or a short double pointed needle, or a cable needle, or anything. I just find it easier if I have a spare needle of some sort, and then some sharp scissors. So let's pretend we are going to pick a round. So I'm just going to pick a random round. I'm not going to unpick the whole round because it takes a bit of time, but I just want to show you how I do it. So this, can you see this line here? That's the beginning of my round, and then I decrease either side of that. So let's just cut one of these stitches. If you can't see the beginning of the round, just choose. If you're doing the body of a sweater, try and choose something that is at the side, and if you're choosing the sleeves, then you should be able to see where the beginning of the round is, because you will have probably some shaping, increases or decreases. Right, where was it? There we were. Okay. Depending on how slippery your yarn is and how far you're unpicking and what kind of stitch pattern it is, with some stitch patterns you might be able to insert a needle all the way around before you cut. With stocking stitch like this, I find that really difficult. If it is a pattern, say garter stitch, where I can clearly see that every other row is like a ridge, or if it's like a lace pattern or colorwork pattern, or somewhere where I can clearly see each row and which row each stitch belongs to, if you like, then I would probably try and insert a needle before I cut. Usually then I would use a smaller needle. It's almost like inserting a lifeline after the fact, if you like. But for this, for stocking stitch, I don't do that. So I'm going to catch that stitch. Now, one thing you have to be aware of is that this strand that you've cut, it could unravel in both directions. Because this is slightly fussy yarn, it's not going to unravel very quickly anyway. Slippery yarn will unravel quicker. So sometimes what I do is, I'd like to use a circular needle, even if I'm picking up from a straight piece, because I can use both ends of the needle. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll pick up a few stitches in that direction, just so that the beginning of my round or the end of my round is safe, and then then I'll start picking up in the other direction. So I'm going to start picking up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to unknit or unpick around. So let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, hope that's not too close up. I'm going to try and pick around, and this is a little bit difficult because this yarn is quite fussy. It gets easier once you get going, I think. Let's see if I can find where this strand is. I think it's that one I'm supposed to be picking up. Where is it? Where's it gone? Okay, this is not a very good example as I can't find it. So let's go the other direction because I can see it here. Okay, so I got a little bit of a strand there. So we're going to go in this direction first, I think. So I'm just going to pick a few rows just to see where we're actually going. And a bit of noise from my side. So I've got these live stitches here. Don't worry too much if you're picking them up so they're sitting the correct way in your needles or twisted. It doesn't really matter. Or even if they're all sitting the same way on your needles. That doesn't matter. The main thing is that you get them all on your needles. I also like to have some of these. Let me just get one. Some of these stitch markers like these, or just some spare threads of yarn. Anything that you can just slip through a stitch quickly if you find that you have missed a stitch a few stitches back, because then you can put that through and then it won't unravel any further. How much it unravels all depends on what kind of yarn you've used. So what I basically do now is I just, hang on, there we go. It's that one and that one. So I've gone into the wrong stitch there. There we go. So I like to just pull on the strand using a spare needle. I usually use a little sewing needle. And then as I get live stitches, I will put my needle through. So I just follow. This probably isn't the perfect yarn to show this. If I haven't, I think I have other tutorials showing this same thing. So if I do, I will link them below, just so you can see different options. You can see here on the top as well, I have all these live stitches. So you could put a needle through that if you needed to. So if you wanted to add some length and you wanted to graft the row back together later on, you could do that. So for example here, I pulled the yarn out completely before I caught it and it nearly unraveled that stitch. If I find that a stitch unravels one row, I usually don't worry about it. I will just pick up whichever stitch is there, even if it's unraveled one or two rows, because as I knit the first round, I tend to keep an eye out for that, and then I will fix any problems like that. So if anything's unraveled one or two rounds, I will fix it. The yarn goes through each stitch twice. So if I pull this out there, that's the stitch, and I pull it out again, and that stitch is now actually unraveled one row. There's a strand at the back here. I'm just going to leave that there. And if this was an actual thing that I was doing, which it's not obviously, I would pick that up later. So I've taken one strand out, and this strand goes through this stitch again. So if you want to make sure it doesn't unravel, you can put your needle in at this point, and then, hang on, where's that gone? There we go. Now it goes through that stitch the second time, and then it's also gone through that next stitch. So I can put my needle into the next stitch and then pull the yarn through. There we go. And then I'm going to pull the yarn through. So that's the next stitch, and I'm going to pull the yarn through there. So I'm not going to show you the next to the round because you just keep going like that. If it's stocking stitch in a yarn that's not too slippery, that's fairly easy to do. If it's any kind of other stitch pattern, it can be more difficult. So how you approach this just depends on your own confidence levels and the stitch pattern that you're using. If you have to do this on a sweater and you're a bit worried about it, just knit a swatch and practice on that. It doesn't have to be a huge swatch, but just practice a bit just to give yourself the confidence that you can actually do it. As I said, I recommend starting with stocking stitch or garter stitch. Garter stitch is quite easy because you have ridges, so I just go in above one ridge and that's fairly easy. Stocking stitch is also fairly easy. Lace, brioche, color work is more difficult. So you just have to be very, very careful if you do as you do it. But doing it this one stitch at a time is definitely safer because you can catch each stitch as you go. All you have to be careful about is the beginning of the row, because the tail is so short that it doesn't start unraveling in the other direction. I didn't worry about that here because I couldn't find the stitch to unpick, so that's fine. But that's one thing to worry about. So sometimes I will do a few stitches in one direction and then I'll carry on in the other direction. So using circular needles is perfect for that because they're basically double pointed needles. I will see if I have any other tutorials on this subject and I will link those below this video. I'm pretty sure I have at least one, maybe more, so I will link those below this video. Have you tried this on your knitting? And did it go okay? Let me know how you got on in the comments. Would you try this on your knitting, or does it just sound too scary? Let me know in the comments, and ask any questions you have in the comments as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.